Good day to you, partner. I'm Guy, and I can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this forsaken camp.
Hey guys, Wheat Solo here, aka the Skeleton King. So we are looking at a basically a pure summons on kill of a Vex level Rathma, and Topwig asked me what kind of kills I'd like to see, and honestly, summons on was one of them. What's interesting is that this build is like kind of budget, you could say. There's a few good pieces or pieces that might be hard to come by, but just the fact that our armor is going to be peace and we're using a witch wild, it's hard to say it's not. Maybe you wouldn't call it budget. Maybe that's not the right way to describe it, but you definitely wouldn't call it. It might be optimal gear, but you wouldn't call it even close to in-game. Maybe mid-game summons on gear for Rathma. The gloves are nothing special. The belt is kind of nice. Coming across FCR rack mesh with 2 max would be kind of tough. But just keep in mind that this gear is pretty reasonable, and this kill actually goes really, really well, except basically for Phase 1, which we're going to see now. Now, why is Phase 1 so bad? Well, we've got 2 major issues. We're relying on summons, okay? And we've got there's actually one other issue. Besides our summons randomly attacking, as you can see, that there's many shots that are going to the spires. Well, some of that is us too, because when we use strafe, guess what? The spires are targetable. I wonder if there's some way they could remove the target function from spires. I don't think any build relies on summons for Rathma. I guess the closest thing I could think of is like a Hydrasork, but I don't even think they're meta anymore. So I don't think they were ever meta, by the way, for Rathma. And if they are meta, I doubt it's a problem. Like, if the problem is Hydras always attack men down, then I'm sure there's a better way to balance the class other than creating targetable spires. Why are the spires targetable? I don't know. I'm assuming it's a coding thing, where it's either easier to do it this way, or maybe there's no real way for them to do it a different way. So this change, or we might not be able to get a change for this. Now, the golems actually kind of died that time, as you can see, mainly because he was able to actually prop the amplified damage from Witch Wild String onto the sanguine golems, and he had a few summons actually stuck on them. Now, decoys are actually really good in this fight. They're really, really, really not very good right now. As you can see, one one decoy right there was attacking Mendel, even though it seemed like he was further away than a spire. But the other decoy was attacking the spire. And so, Mendel teleports around too much, and there's no way to control the decoy other than casting another one. And that's going to bring us to the last real problem we have with this build, besides just Phase 1 issues. Now, Phase 1 issues is the spires being targetable by strafe. The other issue is the FCR and the frame data of a summons on and how atrocious it is. Honestly, they should change it to attack frames, kind of like, Assassins and laying traps. If they don't, they really need to do something in general about summons-ons, because casting feels like it's probably worse than any sort of sexually transmitted disease you can have. And trust me, I've had a few, so I can't attest to them all, but the ones I've had, I'd say this is worse. I don't think you could argue that. I think that was on the cognizance test I took as president of this United States, and they said, so what's worse, summons on casting frames or sexually transmitted diseases? And I said, well, I've grabbed a lot of women by the pussy, and some of them came with something I wouldn't forget, let's say that. And summons on frames not good. So what could they do besides changing it to attack frames? And again, there must be a way to do that. I know there's not an animation, but they could just pick any animation in the game, I think. I mean, again, I don't know what it takes to code this game, and so, you know, if it's not possible, it's not possible. But basically, they could just use any attack animation. And if they don't do that, like maybe you cast all 3 decoys at once, cast all your Valks at once. I guess that's kind of dumb. Maybe at least casting all your decoys at once. I know that's kind of dumb too, but it's just having to cast decoys over and over again for a boss fight or for mapping feels really, really bad. Anyways, but let's just move on. I cut out all of the ad sections because there's really not much to talk about. So now we can talk about the gear a little bit for this video, the skill distribution, which we saw a little bit, of course, and everything else we're going to do. And that is the fact that the Witch Wild, which helps make it budget, there's actually a really good reason to actually use it over Wrath. Now, is Wrath better? I think if you had BIS gear, like absolutely, or very close to, you know, min-maxed gear, then it's hard to argue with the fact that you get a 60% chance to cast amplified damage rather than the fairly paltry Witch Wild of, God, what is it, like, I don't even remember what the percentage is. I'll post it. It's a lot lower. I think it might be 12%, but that sounds too low. Anyways, it's low, and Wrath is high at 60%. But Witch Wild has res on it, and that alone makes it really, really useful. Now, yes, you end up using all of your sockets for shales to hit the max frame data anyways, but you still have an extra socket, as you could see. Basically, just the fact that you get an extra, 30 res from the item, it just makes the gearing way, way easier. And it is kind of cool to be able to do this budget and actually do it pretty well. Now, in this section of the fight, we can actually see that the decoys are doing pretty well against the Void Knights. And that's probably because, for one, it's not like a timer on them. Yes, you want them to die, but you're not too worried about it. We're always able to consistently get up amplified damage on every enemy, right? Because there's no spire, and then all of our ads are always attacking something useful. Also, this like section has actually less AOE damage, and that's partly due to the bugged coding of this fight right now, where the damage doesn't scale properly, and some of the AOE attacks of Rathma do no damage. But the summons actually like survive the entire fight, and so actually this section of the fight gives me hope that this build actually could be kind of good for this. And so moving forward, what could we do? Well, we could go Wrath and go full min-max. Again, we're using Peace right now, right? Well, what about this? What about going more for the Valkyrie side of things and less for the decoy side of things? And in that case, we throw on a T-stroke, right? So we get some of that extra pierce. You know what I'm talking about? Some of that pierce kind of stuff. We get pierce for our Valkyries just from the skill itself. Okay, the passive skill. We max out those Valkyries. We max out Power Strike to give them a few more lightning damage. We also have access to Power Strike ourselves. And now we've got some few extra points to go with. Now what do? Well, we could get Jab. And why would we do that? Well, Jab has good AR, good attack animation. And then our offhand, because if we're using a T-stroke, our offhand could be a Headhunter's Glory. Now, Headhunter's Glory has a chance to cast amplified damage as well. And since we'd be in melee, it would basically increase the chance that all of our Valkyries are actually targeting what they should be targeting. And then also we ourselves, although you can actually see Strafe breaks us out of the bone prisons pretty quickly, I think it's probably also some random damage from around us as well. Like as you can see right there, there would seem to be some summons next to us helping. But basically with Jab, we would never be worried about being stuck in the bone prison again. We'd have the amplified damage. Headhunters is just a good item, gives us a ton of res, gives us 3 sockets, and I think that could be a really cool build. And also there's an idea about, instead of going Jab, just going more into Power Strike skills. So we'd still run Peace, we'd get T-strokes and Headhunters. Well, of course we'd run Andes, it's just too good not to run. The gloves, you could, do what you want, spear or passive. I guess passive for this. Maybe just get passive skills, just because it kind of goes with the theme. And passive skills actually give us a lot of other stuff, like the dodge and evade, avoid attacks thing. But basically, we would turn into like a hybrid class. So we'd have our Valkyries doing a lot of damage, and then we ourselves could provide some damage as well, either with jab or some sort of power strike thing. Now, if we did go with jab, which is a very good idea, we'd really want to max decoys and then probably max power strike last. And in fact, you could argue, which I don't want to argue this, is that the power strike isn't really worth it. Now, I'm a big proponent of power strike, but that's for mapping, and these enemies have way more health than mapping. And so do we really need that extra radius that for mapping, like having a summon with more radius is just the nicest thing in the world. For a boss fight, it's really not that important. So, anyways, that's basically all I have to talk about for this. As you can see, the last phase goes pretty well too. One of the things I'll point out is that he actually had a lot of rejuvenations left after phase 2. It was basically pathetic. One of the smoothest clears on a non-optimal build I've ever seen Vex level. Like non-optimal build, non-optimal gear, and it was pathetically easy. And so, like, is Summons On a legit option for Rathma? It's better than Skellymancer. It's partly also because of the fact that we just have access to useful abilities that keep us alive, and Necromancer's has a hard time with our stat distribution, and not having those skills that just randomly avoid all damage. So that really adds up after a fight. Sorry, there is one more thing I wanted to bring up. So the other problem is the FCR, right? So if we actually go with the T-stroke option, we could keep CTA. On the offhand, put a lidless. And then we'd have one swap. And the only reason I bring this up is because Topwig has been experimenting with swaps anyways. And it wouldn't really affect your inventory, because you could just drop the call to arms and just put the whiz spike on and then pick it up before you enter the portal. For anyone concerned about having access to less pots. And you'd have a whiz spike. Now, swapping is kind of annoying, but just the fact that you would ever have an option to swap and cast, Valkyries or decoys way, way faster is something that I think would actually make the fight smoother, even if you have to swap items, which can be really annoying with any amount of latency or just the way skills work. If you've ever tried to swap weapons like often and then cast things, it can be kind of awkward. Basically, if you haven't finished completely casting, or like you press it a little too soon, like swapping's instantaneous, but it can't happen during certain other moments. You can swap while running, so if you ever try to min-max play, just always remember, try to swap while running, because it creates no issues. But if you try to swap like just standing still and spamming cast or attacks, you're probably not going to get the swap off. And you can see that in PvP too, right? Like, when do they spam swap? Just running around. But I think that would be nice. And then there's one other idea, Naj's Puzzler. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, maybe Naj's Puzzler could be a pretty good idea. All right, thank you very much. Skelly King out. GG.
Play with us. Come and play with us, Daddy.